The Conservative Party's high-profile mayor in Tees Valley, Ben Houchen, chairs 3 different organisations, all aimed at fast-tracking regeneration of the area. But in recent weeks, Private Eye and the Financial Times have accused those bodies of striking secret deals in which public assets are transferred to developers with little or no oversight. Such as the concern over one of those deals that the government has arranged for an independent investigation. The main controversy so far has been about the Tees Work project. Here's BBC Tees political reporter David Macmillan with a brief explainer of that row.
It's a very bitter row and a very complicated business, so this is a very brief summary about what's going on here at Tees Works. So the Redcar Steelworks closed and thousands of jobs were lost. A mayoral development corporation was set up with powers to develop land and infrastructure to clean the site and create new jobs. Then an operating company called Tees Works was created to carry out that work. Now, originally it was split evenly between public ownership and 2 private developers, but then a deal was done to give those 2 private developers 90% of the land. Private Eye magazine ran a series of reports that were very critical of that deal, but the Conservative Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchen said it had to be done to get the site redeveloped quickly. But then, following an investigation in the Financial Times, the Labour Party called for an investigation into Tees Works. Ben Houchen agreed, saying the row was risking jobs and investment and that he'd written to the National Audit Office requesting an independent review. So that's where we're at, but it barely scratches the surface of the claims and counterclaims being made about the Tees Works project. We haven't heard the last of this yet.
Indeed, we haven't. That was David Macmillan, because the Financial Times this morning raises concerns about another body that the Mayor chairs, the Hartlepool Mayoral Development Corporation, which it says is planning to take over civic buildings from the council for development. Well, Ben Houchen, Conservative Mayor of Tees Valley, joins us now. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Good to have you on. Let's start with this deal that's being covered by the Financial Times this morning. What can you tell us about the deal that you've struck with Hartlepool Council?
Well, again, it's the way it's portrayed isn't entirely accurate. The Mayoral Development Corporation is a public body. It has the same governance and oversight procedures as any local council throughout the country. And indeed, we also have tie-back into central government. So the idea that there is some sort of abstract body that people may not understand is just not accurate. We wanted to set up a development corporation. We thought we wanted to bring jobs and investment to a town that sorely needs and deserves it, with having not had very much investment in many decades now. And so we put a proposal forward from the Tees Valley Combined Authority, the organisation that I chair. Now, that's made up of the 5 leaders of the 5 local authorities that cover the Tees Valley region. And we unanimously agreed that a development corporation would be a good thing for the local area. And that included independent, Labour and Conservative councils. The next step of that was to take it to Hartlepool Council. That was because the development corporation would be based in that local authority area. And that went to the full Hartlepool Council meeting. A full council meeting. They then unanimously approved the agreement. They said, actually, we think this is a great idea. Labour, Conservative and independent councillors alike unanimously approved the setting up of the Development Corporation. And then further on, what the powers that are given by government allow a development corporation to do is take control of redundant public assets to be able to regenerate them. So again, we put that proposition forward, and that was then taken again back to Hartlepool Council. That went again to a full council meeting and was unanimously approved by, again, all political parties at the time.
Okay,
so that's what we've done. And that's what we're trying to achieve: regeneration and jobs for Hartlepool.
And people would applaud the idea of regeneration. The concern, though,
well, some wouldn't.
Well, OK, we'll come on to that. But the concern raised is that this was a deal struck in private. Are you saying that that's just not the case?
It's fundamentally untrue. And unfortunately, it's not the first time that the FT have been slightly disingenuous about the facts of the situation. So I can tell you, as I've just said, it went to the combined authority. That was approved by the 5 local authority leaders, 1 Conservative, 1 Labour and 3 independent councils. It was then subsequently sent to Hartlepool Council twice. Their full council meetings, right. Every single councillor, whether they're in power or whether they're a backbench councillor, had access to that information, and they all unanimously approved that.
Right, because you'll know that Labour have accused you and your Conservative colleagues of being pathologically opposed to accountability.
Which is slightly bizarre because the politician you're referring to there is a gentleman called Jonathan Brash, who happens to be the Labour Party candidate in Hartlepool for the general election. He's also a local councillor, and he approved the deal himself twice at Hartlepool Council. He turned up and he put his hand up, he had the papers, and he approved the deal. So it seems slightly bizarre now.
Right. So the Financial Times this morning says that the list of assets to be transferred in this deal was made public by the council after the Financial Times made inquiries.
That's because ultimately there is still a statutory consultation ongoing with the Secretary of State. Again, there is a legal process to go through. So as well as the Combined Authority approving the deal, as well as the Hartlepool Council approving the deal twice, it also then has to go into government.
Right, so just to be clear, the first, is it the case that the public knew about this was as a result of the Financial Times making inquiries?
No, the public have known about the Development Corporation for months and months. I mean, anybody who is on my social media or in the local press.
But the taking on of the civic buildings in Hartlepool.
That was always the plan, absolutely.
And was public.
Which was what public? Sorry.
Was that public, that the plan was to take on the civic buildings in Hartlepool?
The plan was public, absolutely. I think where the controversy is being contrived is because there is a specific list of assets that are obviously commercially sensitive, and the council, not me, which again was
okay. So it hasn't. So the list of assets, the property has not.
It wasn't very clear in the FT, and I don't think it's been reported very clearly on Radio 4 this morning. That has nothing to do with me. The council decided, using their own legal advice and their own officers, that it wasn't appropriate to make that list public yet.
You'll know that there are concerns, Mr. Houchen, because of previous deals. This is the third time that there is where there is a deal being struck, a third transfer of public assets in your region. And let's turn to this, to the one actually that the government has arranged an independent review of, which is strange. There were calls for an AO, National Audit Office, inquiry into the deal that was struck, and yet it's come up with an independent review. And indeed you, in order to clear things up, there's been such a stink about this that even you said, look, we need to have a review. What's your understanding as why it is an independent review arranged by the government rather than a National Audit Office one?
Well, I think that's pretty clear. Michael Gove, the Secretary of State, set out in a very public letter the reasons why the NAO wasn't the appropriate body. I made the request that the NAO, we were happy for them to look into us. They've looked into us once before and found that there was nothing to see. The government decided for lots of reasons, and again, anybody can go online and see the letter published by Michael Gove, that it wasn't the appropriate body. In the same sense, he was basically saying you might as well have got Ofsted to look into us because they're just not the appropriate body for local government. So at my request, because actually government's position was, and as stated in his letter, there is no evidence of anything, any wrongdoing, no criminality and no corruption at Teesworks, despite a Labour MP, Andy MacDonald, standing up in Parliament and lying and abusing his parliamentary privilege to the
hold
country.
on one second, because you've just accused a Labour MP of lying, and we need to explain exactly what he said. He said it in the Commons, where he has. Let me explain. From the audience's point of view, they need to know what's going on. The Labour MP Andy MacDonald, who's he's a Labour MP for neighbouring constituency, he accused you of industrial scale corruption, and he said it in the Commons where he's covered by privilege. You've just accused him of being a liar, which you said on air, where you don't have that, and neither do I as a result of you saying
Absolutely. I did. And Andy MacDonald is a liar and he's a coward.
Right.
And he knows he would never say that outside of Parliament because he's a liar. And on top of that, I've asked him on numerous occasions.
I know because, sorry, you've just used our programme to accuse someone of being a liar. What I will say immediately is that Andy MacDonald, we are going to ask Andy MacDonald for a response to this. So
and you do that. But what I would ask you to do when you do that is ask him to repeat the allegations outside of Parliament. He's never repeated those accusations outside of Parliament because he is a liar. And he will continue to lie in Parliament until the truth is out.
Okay, you called him that. You called him. Please,
this independent review is there to be able to show that the truth is very, very different. The truth is that nothing has gone on.
Right, because the accusations, there are a whole series of accusations that...
What are the accusations?
Well, let's start, and we don't want to lose people, but let's start with the fact that in the Teesside project, the site was transferred to two local developers without any public tender process.
That's Again, completely disingenuous. That's not a statement that Andy MacDonald has made, by the way. That is
No. But that's the accusation against the reason that there's investigation is the lack of transparency around this. Is that the case? No,
that's not the reason for the investigation. Again, please don't misrepresent the position. The reason for the investigation is because Andy MacDonald lied and said that there was corruption. He has no evidence. He's produced no evidence. He didn't even give any examples or evidence within Parliament.
Okay,
has no evidence.
We've got limited time. Rather than having a fight between two MPs, what I'd rather do is get to the bottom of what were public assets and what still are, effectively.
They weren't public assets. That's not true. So, it was never a public asset.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
But they affect... Fine. So I just want you to engage with the substantive issue.
I'm trying to, but you
which
keep
is...
interrupting. But when you make the statement that there was a public asset that was given to a private developer...
Okay, understood. Will you tell us there was no public tender process? Is that right?
There was no public asset. It wasn't a public asset.
What are you saying?
It was never owned by the public.
So there didn't need to be any public tender process when the company that's operating the vacant steel site was transferred to local developers?
It wasn't. They had the site, they had control of the site, and they transferred 50% to us as the public sector. There was no tender process because it was never owned by the public. Again, some really basic facts have gone amiss here, and you are obviously looking at the research that you've been given in local newspapers and some of the national newspapers, and it's just fundamentally untrue. It was never
it's reporting that's been done in the Financial Times over
and that's
a
very well and
period.
good, but it's still not true.
So are you confident? So can I just establish, are you confident that when the independent review or anybody pores over all the paperwork in this, it will be established that it was absolutely in your constituents' interests, that in the people of Teessides and the country's interests?
1,000%. Not only did we have a site that had liabilities of over £480 million that Labour MPs and trade unions at the time of the closure of the steelworks said was going to bankrupt the local councils. It was going to cost the taxpayer £1 billion just to make safe and clean up. Actually, what we found is we've already attracted £2 billion worth of investment, over 2,000 jobs. We're no longer, as a taxpayer, liable for a massive site that was going to be a massive drain on public resource. And absolutely, that report is going to come out, and I'm confident it's going to show that Andy MacDonald is a liar, and I will be calling for him to resign, and I'll also be calling for the Labour Party to reimburse the taxpayer for the waste of time that this review ultimately is, because it's going to show that there is no corruption, there is no illegality and criminality. And so when you go to Andy, please ask him to repeat the allegation outside of Parliament, because he won't.
And I'm going to go to him immediately to suggest, Andy MacDonald, please do come on the programme. We'd love to have you on to respond to that. Ben Houchen, thank you very much. Now then, we are still waiting to hear whether the government will go to court to stop Boris Johnson's WhatsApp messages, diaries and notebooks being given to the COVID inquiry. Its chair, Baroness Hallett, has given the Cabinet Office until 4 tomorrow to hand them over. Although, as we were hearing yesterday, she also revealed that the government claimed to no longer have them. This morning, the Cabinet Minister Mel Stride said, "We absolutely intend to continue to be absolutely transparent and candid." But he also said it seemed to him that requesting lots and lots of data that was unambiguously entirely relevant was not something which added any value. It suggests that the Cabinet Office is still on a collision course with the chair of the public inquiry. Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said the Prime Minister looks really slippery and should comply with the inquiry and do it today. The BBC's political correspondent Nick Eardley joins us now. And Nick, is there any way, are we still heading towards the courts getting involved in this from your understanding?
Yes, I think we are, because the Cabinet Office isn't backing down. Even if it gets hold of all of these documents, it's sticking to its argument that it can't hand over everything because some of it's personal, some of it's private, and it would set a bad precedent. But the inquiry is not going to back down on this either. And fundamentally, this has become a row over who should decide what is relevant to such an important public inquiry. This isn't just a process story. It's about what should be available to the judge who is looking into how the UK government dealt with COVID, the preparations that were in place, and what lessons should be learned.
Nick Eardley, thank you very much. Well, Lord Sumption, Jonathan Sumption, was a Supreme Court judge between 2012 and 2018. I spoke to him earlier and asked where his sympathies lay.
Well, my sympathies are divided. The COVID inquiry is dealing with a matter of vast public importance. Its terms of reference include how the decisions were made, which is a serious issue since there are good reasons for supposing that it was made in a rather knee-jerk way. So from that point of view, I sympathise with Lady Hallett's desire to get hold of WhatsApp messages, which history suggests are the most indiscreet messages that anyone ever puts in writing. We learnt that from Matt Hancock's messages. In which the effect of too much disclosure, well, I would say that because
routinely text or message their opposite numbers because and given to the National Archives in due course.
Needs to be a global priority.
Of course, we encourage R&D and only a few people
defend his record on property regeneration projects in his region. The Financial Times and Private Eye have
humans at all. I personally think, and I've written a recent book about this, epidemics which could have a far higher fatality rate and could really cause a breakdown in society. And so that's, in fact, my main worry. And, of course, one worries even more if there's a possibility of engineered viruses which are more virulent than the natural ones.
Lord Rees, the Astronomer Royal, talking to me. Now, if you were listening at the start of our programme, you will have heard the Tees Valley Conservative Mayor, Ben Houchen, defend his record on property regeneration projects in his region. The Financial Times and Private Eye have been reporting on concerns over the lack of transparency on the projects and whether they're good value for money. In Parliament, the Labour MP Andy MacDonald, under parliamentary privilege, accused the Mayor, Ben Houchen, of industrial-scale corruption, and it prompted Mr Houchen on our programme to accuse Andy MacDonald of being a liar and of being a coward for not saying it outside Parliament. Well, as you may have heard, we asked Andy MacDonald MP if he wanted a right of reply. He's the Labour MP for Middlesbrough, and he joins us now. Good afternoon, Mr MacDonald.
Good afternoon, Sarah.
Would you accuse him again outside Parliament of that?
Well, Sarah, this doesn't pass the smell test, any of it. There are so many elements to this that warrant very close scrutiny and investigation.
Hold on. Sorry, Mr MacDonald, that is a different thing. He accused you of being a liar and a coward because he said you said that in Parliament where you can't be sued and where you can be reported on, so people like me say your comments. Will you say it to him publicly outside Parliament?
Well, I'm quite happy to sit down with Ben and go through my concerns with him because I don't
think
these...
So you won't level the accusation of corruption against him where you don't have protection, legal protection?
Well, Sarah, there is going to be an inquiry. Michael Gove set up an independent investigation, notwithstanding that everybody agreed that the NAO should look at this. And they will opine on these various elements. And if that's the case, that there has been no proper procurement process, that people are obtaining eye-watering levels of value from these transactions, I think people are rightly able to say this is not right. This is not the way business should be done. If there's been a failure of governance and process.
Sorry, Mr MacDonald, you are now saying if that was the case in Parliament,
well, I believe
you
it to be
accused
the
him
case.
of being corruption. He made the point on this programme that what he has done, the regeneration that he has ensured that will happen in the area, will bring in £2 billion of investment, create 2,000 jobs and solve a problem of liabilities of what it is the largest brownfield site
well, it doesn't, you see,
in
that's,
Europe. Okay.
That's the problem. It doesn't resolve the issues of remediation. The South Tees Development Corporation's own chief executive said the STDC as landowner are to conduct all future land remediation for development.
Did you make a mistake
the site.
Accusing him of corruption in Parliament?
No, look, I think it's absolutely right that these matters receive attention and the detail.
Yes,
of
but
what
was your language wrong?
I think it's gained attention for these very serious issues that have been raised by Private Eye and by the Financial Times. And I think hitherto the government have been quite happy to go along with the hard hats and promises approach of Ben Houchen and just say nothing to see here. There's a great deal to see here. The land transactions themselves, transferring a big piece of industrial land for £1 a square acre when supposedly It was to be sold at market value. That's incredibly
as
serious.
We keep saying, it is a story that will not be going away, but people will note, I'm sure, that you've chosen not to repeat what you said in the House of Commons.
These are very serious matters. They need attention, and people have got to be held to account. But you won't repeat
something you could be.
People will ultimately be held to account.
Andy.
If these allegations, which have been substantiated thus far, are borne out by the inquiry.
We're grateful to you for coming on. Thank you very much. Now then, scientists have managed to grow a variety of pea